It's that time of year for a fun, creative, and festive project, and so we're going to be building this wooden Santa Claus house. The entire design will be laser cut from 3mm thick wood, and you're going to need 3 sheets that measure 12 by 16 inches. There's quite a few parts, but the assembly is quite easy, and in a moment I'll show you guys where to get those files. But before we get to that, I just want to say thank you to WeCreat for sending me their 20-watt Vision laser cutter and engraver. This will be my tool of choice today for getting this job done, and I'll put a link to it in the video description down below. And so this is the design that we're going to be building today, and just to be clear, I have no affiliation with this designer or their Etsy store. If you want to build this exact model, I'll put a link to the listing down in the description below, and I purchased this just like anybody else would have to. It's a really nice design and comes with some great instructions, so it comes highly recommended from me. To get this set up in the WeCreat software, we're going to open up a new project, and on the right hand side we can select our material. I'm going to be working with 3mm basswood. Technically I'm using birch, but that's going to be close enough. I'm also going to go up into the settings, and I'm going to change my units to inches because my material is 12 inches by 16 inches. I'm also going to turn on the precise vector path, which apparently makes it easier to select vector paths that are very close together. Next, I'll import one of the SVG files from the design package that I had purchased. Unfortunately, not all of the paths fit inside of the workspace, so I'm going to start individually selecting some of them and just pressing the delete button to get rid of the ones that clearly won't fit. Next, I'll select all of the remaining paths with the shortcut Control A, and then I can start moving them inside of the workspace. I'm going to be paying attention to the workspace ruler at the top and left-hand side of the screen to make sure all of the vector paths that I'm selecting and moving around to stay within the 12-inch by 16-inch sheet that I said I had. I'm also going to be cognizant of what I'm selecting because it's very easy to select adjacent paths just like I've done here, and if you move around the wrong vector path, you could screw up the design. So I'm going to be very careful, as I had said, and I'm going to be selecting some of these smaller parts and rearranging everything to fit in the 12 by 16 area. I sped up this part of the video because it's pretty straightforward. It's just me clicking these different paths and dragging them around. However, this design package consists of 2 SVGs, so I'm going to add another sheet. I've done that by clicking the little plus sign down at the bottom. Then I've dragged the second SVG into this workspace. And you can see it also does not fit into the work area. And so again, I'm going to start rearranging things here, and just a little tip, you can take some of these smaller parts and you can nest them inside of the parts that will otherwise be wasted when they're cut through. Next, I'm going to add another page. I'm going to put the first SVG file onto this page as well. And that's because I need to bring back those large circular paths that I had deleted from the first page when we first started rearranging things. However, a better way of moving vector paths around from one sheet to another is just to select the vector paths that you need, press Ctrl C to copy them, and then you can move over to the sheet that you want to paste them onto, and you'll just use the regular Ctrl V shortcut to paste them onto the sheet, and then I can rotate them around and now move them onto the unused space on my third sheet. I'll kick things back into fast forward mode here and just continue to rearrange all of these vector paths to fit on all 3 of my sheets. And once I'm happy with the placement, I'm going to use the Control A shortcut to select everything, and then I'm going to select Cut. So I've essentially turned all of the vector paths into cuts, but not all of them need to be cuts, so I'm going to select the ones that are intended to be engraved. I'll click on those individually, and I'll click on Fill Engrave, and then I'm going to change the power setting to 80%. This was the most efficient way that I could think of doing this because there were many more paths to be cut and many fewer paths to be engraved. Now that I've got all of the designs ready to go, it's time to fire up the WeCreat Vision. I'll put a link in the top right hand corner of the screen right now to the previous video that I did on this machine if you guys aren't familiar with it. Based on the previous chapter of this video, hopefully you guys can see that the software is very easy to work with and the hardware is no different. In that video, I went through the unboxing, assembly, and all of the basics of getting started with this machine. I would recommend watching that video if you're just getting started with the WeCreat Vision and you're also looking for a bunch of different material examples beyond what we're seeing here in this video, which is just working with wood. And so I've loaded in my 12 by 16 by 3mm thick piece of birch, and I'm going to press the autofocus button, and the machine will autofocus the laser to the top of the workpiece surface. And in the background, you'll also see the workpiece itself using the onboard camera. I'm going to press start, and that's going to send this job to the WeCreat Vision, and all we have to do now is press the button on the front to confirm that we want to run this job. The large viewing window at the top of the machine, plus the integrated LEDs, make it very easy to see inside of the enclosure and ensure that your job is being processed according to plan. The reference materials for the through cuts are perfectly fine. The engraving I bumped up to 80%, but the one thing I noticed is that there is some dead space here at the top of my material, and I believe I should have located the material to the bottom left-hand corner of the laser bed instead of the top left. I'll fix that for the next job, which is this second sheet of our design, and so the same process here, I'll start, and this time I'm going to get a warning saying the vector fill or bitmap is too close to the canvas border. Now, I'm not entirely sure why this matters because I still am inside of the workable area, so in an attempt to fix this, I am going to shift some of these designs around and try and move them away from the border a little bit, but I still keep getting this message, so we'll just run with it and see what happens. It might have something to do with how the laser head is able to accelerate or decelerate near the edges of the physical limitations of the machine, but that's just speculation, and I also have a feeling that may only have an impact on grayscale images, unlike a design like this, which is just a single shade for the engrave, so perhaps near those borders there's just less coordination the machine has to do when it comes to modulating the power, speed, and acceleration of the laser module. And again, this is purely speculation because as far as I can tell, right up to the edges of my workpiece, both the engraving and cutting power has been completely uniform. With the exception of one or two parts, which I could easily break away once outside of the machine, all of the through-cut parts just fell out of the original workpiece. Therefore, I'll leave all of my settings unchanged, and we'll process the final sheet of our design. And if you guys haven't been paying attention to the estimated processing times showing up in the software when I go to start the job, the total time for all three of these sheets works out to be about 2 hours. Some of our design sheets are pretty densely packed with through cuts, which is obviously done at a slower speed than the engraving. And from my experience with other diode lasers, this seems completely reasonable for the 20-watt blue diode laser on the WeCreat Vision. Now that we have all of our sheets processed, we can lay them all out on the table and reference the original designs, making sure nothing fell through the laser bed and got lost. We can also do a quality control check, and from everything I can see, all of the small details are present, and I'm also very happy with how those through cuts came out with no burning or charring at the edges. The air assist module on the Vision works great, and it's another automated portion of the machine where you just plug it in and you don't have to worry about the settings. Before assembling all of these pieces, I'm going to add a little character to them using some wood stain. I've got 3 different kinds, and I like doing this to my laser cut projects because it makes the final product look more polished and interesting. Contrasting colors or stains can add depth to parts that are overlaid on top of one another so they don't just look like a single piece. For this project, I'm just working with what I had in my shop, but if I were to go out and buy some different ones, I'd probably get something with even more contrast to make some of these parts pop even more. I didn't show it in this video, but one thing I would also recommend doing before going through the staining process is cleaning off any soot or charring on the surfaces of your parts, because you don't want to rub that in and smudge it across the surface of your wood. I was fortunate that there was nothing like that to deal with on these parts, but on other parts, I personally just use a simple air duster to accomplish this task, and I'll put a link to the electric air duster that I use in the video description down below, so you don't have to continuously buy cans of compressed air. This design package came with some very nicely illustrated instructions that were a breeze to follow. However, at first I thought I had maybe done something wrong because some of the slots were a little loose, but it became evident later on that this was done by design so that once you start to fit all of the other pieces together, it leaves a little bit of wiggle room for the tolerances. The parts that were intended to snap together with a reasonable amount of force did so perfectly as well, and so it seemed like the accuracy of the WeCreat Vision was definitely acceptable. Tab and slot construction is extremely popular when working with wood and acrylic with these laser cut machines, so it's obviously very important that the machine that you're working with is reasonably accurate. If the interference fit between parts isn't strong enough and you want things to be even more permanent, then consider using adhesives. For wooden parts like these, I typically fall back on using good old-fashioned wood glue. I didn't show it in this video, but for smaller and delicate parts like this sign that goes on the front of Santa's house, I definitely used some wood glue here. At this point here, I'll let you guys enjoy the remainder of the assembly without further commentary, and I'll join you guys again when this is complete. After a bit more dressing up, this is the final result and I really love the way that it turned out. If you guys buy these files from the designer, there's a few different sizes that you can make, and this was, I believe, the largest one that could be made with 3mm thick wood. It stands about 8 inches tall, and it's going to look amazing with all of my other Christmas decorations. And again, I just want to reiterate that I have no affiliation with this designer, but I'm going to put a link to this Etsy listing in the video description down below because I feel that it is important to support other makers and creative people. I'll also put a link down below where you can find the WeCreat VISION laser cutter and engraver. I want to say thank you to WeCreat for sending me this machine, which allowed me to complete this project. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for all of your support in 2023. I'd like to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.